Welcome everybody. We're just letting all our participants into the room and we will formally start in a moment. Welcome everybody, just letting everyone into the virtual room and we'll start in a moment. Kia ora, my name is Sharon Lloyd, General Manager of the Trans-Tasman Business Circle here in New Zealand. In keeping with the traditional welcome of the Indigenous people of Aotearoa, New Zealand, I am pleased to welcome everybody here accordingly. Kia koutou te tangata whenua, Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei, e mihi nui, kia koutou e tēnei wā. Kia tātou te hanga ora, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. I also acknowledge the original custodians of Australia and pay our respects to the elders, past, present and future, for they hold the memories, the traditions, the culture and hopes of Indigenous Australia. We are delighted today to welcome over 3,000 guests from around the world. Hello to all of you and thank you for joining us. We are here, of course, in advance of regulatory authorities moving towards a fully data-driven environment to enable efficient and risk-based clearance processes. And we're so pleased to partner with DHL Express Australia on this important topic. We appreciate their support for business readiness and to ensure a smooth transition through to the regulatory changes. Thank you to you and welcome to all of your team. A warm welcome to our panel today. Gordon Wright, VP Customs and Regulatory Affairs at DHL Express Europe, Agnes Nagy from the European Union Commission, Ben Somerville, Senior Manager Customs and Regulatory Affairs at DHL Express Australia, and our moderator, Michael Byrne, International Freight Coordinator General at Australian Trade and Investment Commission. We look forward to hearing from you all shortly. Welcome to everyone coming into the room now, and a reminder that the briefing today is on the record. Thank you for submitting your questions in advance to the panel. Due to the high number of registrations today, we unfortunately won't be able to accept any further questions live. However, if you would like to continue the conversation or for any further advice, please contact DHL directly and the details will be available in the chat box. It now gives me great pleasure to formally introduce Michael Byrne. Michael was appointed International Freight Coordinator General at Austrade in March 2020 to assist with the Australian Federal Government's COVID-19 response. Michael's appointment follows a distinguished 30-year career in executive positions both in Australia and internationally in the logistics, supply chain, retail and property sectors. Michael has held numerous board positions and is a current board member of various commercial, education and government organisations. Thank you, Michael, and over to you to get us formally started.
And good evening, good afternoon and good morning to everyone. First of all, I'd like to draw your attention to the disclaimer on the screen. It is not my intent to read that out in the interest of time. I'd like to thank everyone for being here today, particularly to the presenters, and we're deeply appreciative of them providing this opportunity to over 3,000 registered attendees. If I move on to the agenda for today, firstly, we'll be talking about the understanding the upcoming changes, why the changes are happening, what are the changes, an overview of the two VAT collection models. We'll then move on what businesses need to do, completing a customs declaration with quality data, key data, element categories for a successful customs clearance, then into takeaways, more information, and then I will work through around 13 to 14, depending on time, key questions that have been pre-submitted and triaged into the most common themes pre-submitted by our attendees today. And then we'll go through what further support and other information. On that basis, and to make sure we stick to time, I will now pass over to Agnes. Thank you.
Hello, and probably that's the easiest way to greet you. It is my pleasure to be with you at our time early this morning. In the next 10 minutes or so, I will give you a bit of insight in the background and the context of the changing VAT and customs e-commerce rules. Thanks to the technological developments, the boom in e-commerce has changed the way we trade, do business, and shop. This trend has grown even more in response to the COVID-19 and the related lockdowns around Europe and all over the world. And so this trend will likely to continue in the future. Now VAT rules had to catch up with these trends so that everyone benefits from fairer taxation and simple process to declare and pay VAT. The new EU VAT commerce rules entering into force on the 1st of July are fit for the digital single market. They are fairer, simpler, and more fraud-proof. In 2015, when the studies informing the decision on the new VAT e-commerce rules were conducted, there were about 150 million low-value parcels imported into the EU. This led to an estimated 5 billion euros of revenue losses for the EU member states. A small part of it is a legitimate loss due to the VAT exemption threshold, which takes about 1 billion euros, but the major part of it is really inherent to fraud and the misuse of the exemption threshold. Due to the dynamic growth of e-commerce, which takes about 13–15% annually, and also the increase of the proportion within this increase of the e-commerce imports, for 2021, we estimate an importation of more than 1 billion low-value parcels into the EU, and the VAT losses are estimated to grow up to 7 billion euros. However, many experts say that these numbers are highly underestimated. So in terms of import volumes, we are getting closer to the importation of 2 billion parcels. So why we are so uncertain about these numbers? As you know, the EU is a customs union. That means we operate on the basis of a common set of rules, on the basis of our Bible, the Union Customs Code, and have a common trade policy vis-à-vis third countries. However, the implementation of these rules lies primarily with the member states using their national IT systems for the importation. E-commerce and the importation of low-value consignments is one of the areas where, at the moment, member states have a lot of discretion for implementing the rules. Most of these rules were introduced a long time ago when the importation of low-value consignments mainly focused on gifts and commercial samples. Slight adjustments were introduced in the UCC that was adopted in 2013, but these are clearly not sufficient today when more than 70% of the EU population purchase goods online. So according to the current rules, goods up to 150 euros can be imported duty-free, and goods up to 22 euros, even for goods up to 22 euros, even the VAT is waived. As no duties are to be collected, the import formalities are rather simplistic. So the goods can be released for free circulation by any other act in accordance with the UCC. As the name says, any other act means diverse solutions in member states with one common element, any other than a formal customs declaration. Some member states have developed an IT system for a manifest-based reporting for the low-value goods, but others work fully paper-based. Therefore, the aggregation of the import data at union level is almost impossible. It is true that such simplified formalities allow the swift release of the goods, but no doubt they make extremely difficult the life of customs administrations so that they can carry out their tasks properly and make the targeting of controls rather challenging for them. Fraudsters and criminals have recognized these shortcomings, and not only to avoid VAT and customs duty payment, but also to benefit from the alleviations in these customs formalities. Therefore, e-commerce goods are systematically undervalued or declared in a member states with more favorable VAT rates, rather than in the member states where they are actually consumed. Until March this year, goods below 22 euros and postal consignments in general, so regardless of their value, were waived from the obligation to lodge a security and safety, so-called entry summary declaration. So the security and safety screening could not be done properly on these goods before they arrived in the EU. Given that the manual selection for control and the lack of electronic data, the checks of the compliance with import prohibitions and restrictions was also extremely challenging for customs. In addition to the security gap, the waivers granted for postal consignments also created an uneven level playing field between postal operators and other operators with comparative business profiles. Therefore, it was clear that the rules are not sustainable in the long run. So what are the changes that this year will bring? The new e-commerce rules entering into force in a couple of days aim at mitigating revenue losses, managing the influx of low-value consignments, and leveling the playing field between third country and EU businesses. The implementation of the changes required an update or deployment of several customs and taxation IT systems. What are the main changes? The change with the biggest impact on taxation and customs is doubtless the removal of the 10 or 22 euro de minimis threshold. We call it 10 because 10 is a mandatory waiver, but member states may have granted a waiver up to 22 euros. As of July, it means that as of July, all imports of goods into the EU will be subject to VAT payment. In order to counter the effects of the removal of the VAT exemption threshold, the VAT package introduced two new facilitations for the payment and collection of import VAT. The first one is a so-called import one-stop shop. Under this scheme, the VAT is collected at the time of the online purchase. Besides, the approach also introduces a financial liability for the online marketplaces that will become the so-called deemed supplier for all the sales transactions that they facilitate through their platform up to a goods value of 150 euros. The registration for AEST is voluntary. However, once registered, the operator has to apply the scheme and collect VAT for all the sales made to consumers in the EU for the supplies of goods up to 150 euros. And one registration is sufficient for all their sales into the EU. If the AEST is not used, then the VAT remains to be collected upon importation. In order to facilitate the VAT collection and limit the liability of the representatives or intermediaries who are involved in the import clearance of e-commerce goods, such as DHL, for example, the directive introduced the so-called special arrangements. The concept of the special arrangements is based mainly on existing customs simplifications, and it can only be used in the member state of consumption, so where the goods are used, or the member state of the consignee. Even if the VAT in this case is somewhat simplified, it still remains the burden of the carrier or other representative. So probably this approach will be more expensive for the consumer. If the use of the special arrangements is also voluntary, and then the standard VAT collection mechanism remains an option. These VAT rules required also adjustments to the customs processes, legislation, and also the IT systems. On top of these new procedures, as of 15th of March, as you all know, the rules regarding the entry summary declaration have changed, and postal operators and express carriers are obliged to submit a 7+1 preloading data to the ICS2, the new import control system. This requirement applies regardless of the value of the goods, and it will be gradually introduced for other transport modes than air in the coming years. In addition, in order to collect VAT or to ensure that the VAT has been collected, all goods imported into the EU will be subject to an electronic customs declaration as of 1st of July. To mitigate the impact of these increased obligations on low-value imports, it was necessary to introduce a new customs declaration that contains 3 times less data than a full declaration. This data set is based mainly on the postal customs declaration, the data content of the so-called CN23 form, and designed for the release for free circulation of low-value consignments, which are not subject to import prohibitions and restrictions. Excise goods are excluded, but excise goods are also excluded from the VAT simplifications. And this special declaration for low-value consignments applies regardless of the declarant, so no more privileges for postal operators, and also for all VAT schemes subject to minor variations in the data content. So once again, to sum up, the new rules, e-commerce rules, VAT e-commerce rules will enter into force on the 1st of July. There are no transitional rules for the removal of the import de minimis threshold. It means that VAT will be due on all goods imported into the EU on or after 1st of July. This applies regardless whether the goods were ordered before that date. So on the other hand, AEST cannot be used by the seller or the deemed seller before the 1st of July. So this means that there might be a short interim period where you can expect some delays in the delivery of the goods because VAT will have to be collected at the border. This will, of course, phase out as the AEST usage rolls out and goods arrive at the border already VAT prepaid. But it is not only delays that you can expect in the deliveries, but as the European consumers can also expect an increase in the prices or some additional cost upon the arrival of the imported goods. On the Commission side, in order to inform all stakeholders, we have launched a comprehensive communication campaign targeting all relevant stakeholders. The first phase of this communication campaign has targeted mainly the businesses, and we are reaching now the second phase where the focus is more and more on the consumers. We have prepared several explanatory notes, guidance documents, leaflets, which are all available on the TAXUD website. With that, I reach the end of my presentation, and I give the floor back to Michael or Johnny. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you, Agnes. I think it's coming to me next. Gordon Wright. Like Agnes, I'm based in Brussels, the centre of the European Union, where all the institutions and the Parliament is based. So if we could go to the next slide, please. So I think it's really important to mention at the very beginning that these changes affect all 27 member states. We have had quite a number of questions from shippers and sellers to say, are there any EU countries exempted from these changes? Well, they're not. They apply to all 27 member countries. And Agnes gave a little bit of a background in terms of the motivation for these changes. But one of the other key motivations, and I'm sure Agnes will correct me if I'm wrong, is to create a level playing field. For example, if you are selling goods from one member state to another member state, regardless of the value, VAT is applicable. However, currently, if you are selling goods from outside the European Union into the European Union, then this threshold applies. So if you're shipping goods for under 22 euros, you don't have to pay VAT. So one of the motivators from the European Commission and the member states was to create that level playing field and make the European Union more competitive. Next slide, please. So what are the big changes? And there's been lots of questions around this. What actually does it mean in practice? Well, it means, as we've heard from Agnes, that from the 1st of July, the value-added tax, VAT rules in the European Union are going to change, and change quite fundamentally. And what that means also in practice was that 22 limit underneath which you currently do not have to pay VAT, you will actually have to pay VAT after the 1st of July. It will cover all goods imported into the European Union. They'll all be subject to VAT, but there are some different collection possibilities available. I understand from discussions with the European Commission and Agnes in the past that there was recognition that by bringing these 0 to 22 goods into scope, it could be quite burdensome on trade, and therefore some new collection mechanisms for VAT were put in place to alleviate some of those problems. Looking on the right-hand side of the slide, you can see from this schema what's in scope and what's not. In terms of customs duties, nothing changes. It is as it is today after the 1st of July. But what does change is that after the 1st of July, the 0 to 22 goods value, those shipments come into scope and VAT will be payable on them. Basically, you've got two options with that. You've got this one-stop shop option, which is a new collection model, and that is only for B2C shipments up to 150 euros. Or you've got really the current model that you've got today, which, and I'll go on to provide a few more details on that. And that can also be for your business to consumer or your business to business shipments. And that will be the case right up to 150 euros. Both of those collection models will be available. Moving on. So when you look at the two collection models, the new kid on the block, if you like, is this one-stop shop IOSS collection model. There are some caveats with this, though. It's basically for these business-to-consumer transactions with the value up to 150 euros. And as you heard from Agnes, you as a seller, as a shipper, if you decide to use this model, then you're locked into it for all your shipments up to 150 euros. But you can choose from the 1st of July to choose between two options, really. The first one is without IOSS, collection at the point of importations, probably as you're doing today for your over 22 shipments, or you can opt for the IOSS collection model, and that's at the point of sale. So next slide, please. I'll go into these in a bit more detail. Without the one-stop shop model, as mentioned, that's for your B2C and your B2B, and it's for any goods value. So it's for 0 up to whatever value your shipment is. It's the same as the current process in place for the shipments over 22. And the way it works is that we will pay the VAT on importation, and then we will charge back the pre-selected payer. And what that means is, as it is today, if you pre-select to pay all the DHL charges when booking a shipment on behalf of your customer or the receiver of the goods, we will actually pay the VAT and we'll charge it back to you together with any other customs related charges, if they're applicable, of course. And what that means in practice is that using that method ensures that there's no unexpected charges to your customers receivers of the goods. That's all been taken care of. And many of you will be familiar that that's known within DHL as duties and tax paid billing service. If you're unfamiliar with it and you're interested in that model, then obviously you can contact your DHL representative for more information. As an alternative to that, of course, and I'm sure many of people that are on this call today will know that the importer can opt to pay the VAT directly to the authorities upon importation. And in order to do that, they have to have their own import deferment account. So without IOSS, this is the two ways that you can handle those particular shipments. Next slide, please. So looking at the new model, with the one-stop shop model, the IOSS, that is collection at the point of sale. This one is specifically aimed at those online platforms or online sellers, and in recognition of the growth of e-commerce, as mentioned by Agnes. But remember the caveats associated with this. If this system is attractive to you, remember it's only for those business to consumer shipments with the goods value up to 150 euros. In that case, the VAT is collected by the online seller at the moment of purchase, and then the online seller pays the tax authorities in the European Union via a monthly VAT return. And the way it would look in practice, I mean, we're all familiar with buying goods online these days. You would go online to, say, an online platform, select your products. When you get to checkout, you'll see the cost of the product, if there's any admin costs, but you'll also see a VAT amount. And that is the VAT amount that's associated with the member state where you're purchasing the goods from, and then you would purchase the goods. So you actually pay the VAT upfront. The difference with this particular scheme, as Agnes touched on, it removes the need to register for VAT payment in each of the EU member states for B2C goods up to €150. With this scheme, you can actually register in one EU member state, and that identification number will count for all of your shipments into all 27 member countries. There is an additional caveat with this. If you're actually based outside of the European Union, you need to appoint a tax representative within the European Union to fulfill your VAT obligations on your behalf. We've had quite a few questions on who are these people. Well, the tax representatives are, of course, all your big accounting firms that we're all familiar with. But if you do a simple search on the internet for AEST tax representatives, you'll see there's quite a few companies that are now beginning to offer this service. It's important to note that the AEST registration is done by the online seller of the goods. But if the goods are sold via online marketplace, the online marketplace needs to be AEST registered and also fulfill the VAT obligations. And the AEST number of the marketplace has to be provided. Again, an important note at the bottom there that you can see, if you opt to use the AEST, you must provide that identification number electronically to DHL with the invoice data so that we can use it for your clearance process. If you don't do that, then what will happen most probably is that we will have to levy the VAT upon the import of the goods. So in essence, you would end up with VAT being paid twice, and obviously want to avoid that. One thing I do want to mention that the AEST numbers, it's really important that if you opt for this, you keep that number secure and you provide it electronically to us, and you don't put it on your paper invoices or so on, because there obviously is concerns that you could have your AEST number hijacked and used by other entities. So just please bear that in mind if you want to use this method. Next slide, please, Georgia. So this is basically how the process works. The online seller charges the VAT amount to the buyer at the moment of purchase. The buyer, as I mentioned, pays the VAT amount to the online purchaser. And then the online seller pays that VAT amount to the tax authorities via a monthly VAT return, keeping a copy of all documents and records, normally up to 10 years. Next animation, please, Georgia. But very important to note that if you are actually established outside the European Union, you need to have this intermediary. You need this tax representative in the European Union that will take care of your compliance. They'll be making the monthly VAT payments on your behalf to the tax authority, and they'll undertake all those roles for you. Next slide, please. So looking at the customs clearance process from the one-stop shop, this new process. So in this case, in terms of the online seller, they charge the VAT to the buyer. They provide the IOS number in the commercial invoice data, the electronic commercial invoice data to us, to DHL Express and shipping. We prepare the import customs declaration, but we need that IOSS number and we submit that to the EU customs authorities concerned. The EU customs authority obviously do their due diligence. They decide whether they want to inspect or whether they want to clear at the border clearance process. That's completed. And then the buyer receives the goods without any need to pay any VAT to DHL, because that's all been taken care of at the point of sale, of course. Next slide. So now we move on to what your business needs to do, and I'll pass back to Ben. Over to you, Ben.
Thanks very much, Gordon, and hello all. Look, thanks for the opportunity to be able to unpack some of these changes to you, and hope you found it informative to date. So what I'm going to take you through now is the actual customs declaration side of the process, and importantly, how good quality data is such a critical aspect to that customs clearance process. So next slide, please, Georgia. Thank you. So as we've seen and heard that the changes from 1 July with the VAT threshold of the 22 euro being abolished, but in respect to the customs declaration, the important point to note here is that currently manifest clearances, what's known as manifest clearances, are allowed, which effectively is consolidating all the low value clearances into one customs clearance. From with the EU's decision to abolish the VAT-free threshold from 1 July, that manifest clearance option will cease to exist, which means that they will require one formal customs declaration for every consignment, regardless of value. So it is an important point to note, and it does underscore the importance of good quality data to be able to lodge those customs declarations. Next slide, please, Georgia. So in terms of the quality data that I've just referred to, I guess the key point to make here is that with the provision of that data, it ultimately will lead to a more efficient customs clearance process, which will reduce the delays and make it a better experience for your customers. So the exporters that are listening to this call now, it's so critical that you really get this piece right so that that customs clearance is as efficient as possible. With the commercial and the pro forma invoices that you're preparing and submitting to DHL Express, it's important that that is transmitted at a line level and that it's transmitted, as we've heard from Gordon, electronically. Key point. Looking through with the goods descriptions, two things are of note. They need to be complete and they need to be accurate. So you can see there that things like samples and terms like spare parts are simply unacceptable. I'll touch a little bit more on goods descriptions to give you some tangible examples in a moment. The other itemised values need to be accurate and itemised. So not rolled up into one level, one value, not free of charge, FOC. Everything has to be itemised and accurate in its value. The next point is with a customs tariff code. Many of you dialing in now would be familiar with the term HS, the harmonised system. It's a tariff code. This is very important in being able to determine what commodity we're talking about, and it's valid for shipping goods all around the world. And there's some other key points which I'll go through in detail in a moment, such as item quality and some other elements. So with the next slide, please, if you could bring that up. So this is a non-exhaustive list, but it is quite helpful if you can for you to see the unacceptable terms. So we've had a lot of, there may be exporters from around the world shipping to the EU of apparel and clothing right now. And you may well be looking at this thinking, well, I'm shipping clothing, I'm putting clothing on my documentation, why is that unacceptable? And you can see there to the right of the screen, the acceptable terms. It needs to be the next level down. It needs to be more granular in the information that's provided to the EU customs authorities. So is it men's, is it women's, is it a shirt, skirt, dress, and the like? Similarly with electronics, again, they're electronic goods. We need to understand, are they computers, are they CD players, are they phones, and so on. It needs to have that next level of data so that a more efficient risk assessment process can be undertaken by the authorities. Another one that I see very, very often is from exporters just looping everything up and putting a description as spare parts or machinery parts. That is very vague, and really we just need to look at if they're machinery parts, that's fine, but what type of machine are we talking about and what types of parts are we talking about? And really the last one there, gifts and samples, or hopefully by now from what you've heard, you'll understand that is far too broad, very difficult to understand the risk associated with something as broad as samples. So it's just getting that information right to that next level down will really improve the efficiency of the border clearance process, and as I mentioned, the experience for your customers. Next slide, please. So this is just a breakout of the different key data elements. I won't go through them in extreme detail, but it is important to note the first one with the exporter of record, or EOR is a term that you'll often see. Similarly with the receiver, the importer of record, or the IOR. This is just a very basic, a very common error that we see from an exporting perspective, is that if they have a consignment, a shipment for a private individual, and it gets to the receiver's name, they will think, well, this is for a company, it's not a company, so therefore I will just put not applicable or a dot or a dash just to get through to the next field. Unfortunately, what that translates into is deficient information at the point of clearance when it gets to the EU. So it's very important, if they are private individuals, I'll use an example of John Smith. It needs to be the full name, the full first and surname. So John Smith, not Mr. Smith, not John, not Smithy, John O, no variations of that. It has to be the full name. Similarly with the street address, the zip code, and the country of origin and the like. Then moving through, you can see the contact details. Again, this is not rocket science we're talking about, but the more specific contact details that you can provide, the easier it will be for our customs team in the EU, should they have the need to chase any more information or to anything relating to the clearance or the delivery. They've got it there at their beck and call with the email address and the phone number. The issuing country as well, with the registration number. Gordon and Agnes both made the very important point with IOSS, is please, that number needs to be submitted electronically. Otherwise, you could be collecting VAT from your customer at the point of sale, and when it gets to the EU, that could be applied again. Double taxation is not fun, believe me. It's messy and it's a poor experience for your customers. So just getting that information right. And the next slide, please, Georgia. The last slide here is just the continuation of those data element fields. Goods description, you can see at the top, sunglasses with lenses that are optically worked. That's perfect. That's textbook perfect if you can put something in there. An example of what, instead of sunglasses, that would be unacceptable would be fashion goods. Now, sunglasses are obviously fashionable goods, but if you just put something as broad as that, that could relate to handbags or clothing, and it's very difficult to understand what the goods are. So goods description, harmonised system, tariff codes, the quantity, the currency. Again, the currency is something that I quite often see. They'll just put a dollar sign. We don't know if it's Australian dollars, US dollars. Sometimes it'll be blank. We don't know if it's euro, Japanese yen, Sing dollars. There's so many variables that come into play when that data quality is not as it should be. And the other point there that you'll see against 6 is the Incoterm. Incoterm is the international commercial term, and that's essentially the responsibility up until the point of payment that the shipper sends and that the receiver then takes over. So the example that EXW is X works, and it is important that you put the Incoterm on your documentation and submit that electronically to DHL Express so that it is clear on who pays for what, and the documentation type and the date. So look, you can see, you'll all get a copy of this presentation so you can have a look and spend some time in going through these data elements. But the key point is to reinforce what I said at the outset, is good quality data when it comes to customs declarations is of paramount importance. Needs to be submitted at line level electronically, and that will really improve the experience for your customers when it comes to the clearance and delivery in the EU. Thanks very much.
So Ben, I think it's back to me for the last key sort of takeaways on the presentation. Moving to the next slide. So some key takeaways. If we can load up the animation. Right, the first one, as we said, this applies from the 1st of July, these new changes. All commercial goods imported into the European Union are going to be subject to VAT, and the current exemption basically for up to 22 disappears. You've got 2 VAT collection models, as we've mentioned. You've got without the one-stop shop method, which is basically the current method that you're using today for your over 22 shipments. It's the same as the process that exists. In that case, we pay the VAT authorities on your behalf, and we charge back the customer, or the customer opts, as I mentioned earlier on, to pay the customs direct via their deferment account. If you pre-select to pay all those charges to DHL, when booking a shipment, then we'll outlay and pay it and charge it back to you. What this does, this method, it ensures that there's no charges to your customers or receivers of the goods. A clean process. As mentioned, this is the TDB billing service. Or you can opt for this new system, which is IOSS. But remember those caveats with it. It's 3 caveats that you need to consider. First of all, it's your business to consumer shipments only. It's for goods values up to 150 euros. And if you opt for this scheme, you are locked into the scheme for your shipments up to 150 euros. And what that means in essence is you can't mix 1 and 2. If you opt for 2, then you have to stick with 2 for up to 150 euros. It is optional. Both schemes are optional. It's up to you to decide. But in the case with this one, it is slightly different because rather than the VAT being collected at import, it's actually collected by the seller and then paid to the customs authorities either directly or if you're established outside the European Union via that intermediary, that tax representative acting on your behalf. So the third important takeaway on this slide is remember that this is for all shipments. All shipments will require that formal customs declaration in order for us to clear your goods successfully with customs authorities. And as we've heard from Ben, it's really, really important that you give us complete and accurate commercial pro forma invoice data electronically to DHL. And I wanted to touch on this just for a moment to let you all know that there's additional scrutiny now coming from the European Union Customs Administrations on data quality. Recently, they issued some guidance on acceptable and unacceptable goods descriptions. And what I'll suggest to my Australian colleagues is that we actually provide a link to that document, that guidance, together with this presentation, because that really will help you look at goods descriptions and work out which ones work and which ones do not work. Agnes touched on, when it comes to data quality, a new additional customs procedure that was introduced in March this year, which is a safety and security declaration that we complete on your behalf, preloading of your shipments from the last point of departure into the European Union. What we're finding is that most of those issues that are occurring through that customs procedure are down to data accuracy. So again, it's really, really important that you fulfill and complete all those data fields necessary with the most accurate information possible. Next slide, please, Georgia. So in terms of next steps, it's really do take the time to complete and understand these new regulations coming out from the European Union and how they will impact you as customers. There's a lot of information that's available on the EU Commission DG TAXUD website where Agnes works. Lots of guidance there that can help you, but also take a look at the DHL EU Customs website as well. That will provide you with a great deal of information, guidance and information to help you in your day-to-day process. Think about which VAT collection model you want to use. Do you want to stay with what you've got, or would this new one-stop shop be more suitable going forward? And then again, as we've mentioned, please do provide your commercial pro forma invoice electronically to us with that high quality data. Again, if you've got any questions or are not yet providing DHL with complete and accurate commercial invoice data electronically, you can always reach back to your sales representative or the DHL Electronic Shipping Solutions team to learn more about the options available to your business. So if you're unsure after this presentation today, you've got any questions, then please do reach back to us. That's what we're here for. Okay, with that, I think I pass to Michael.
No, you stuck with me for one more minute, Gordon. Thank you.
Okay, back to you, Ben.
Thanks very much, Gordon. And just with the, in terms of the more information, look, Agnes, Gordon and myself have downloaded a lot of information I can appreciate, but if you can go to the next slide, you'll see a series of links, which the first link, the VAT for e-commerce, is taken from the European Commission's official website. And those links, which will be provided to the attendees, will get you straight to the relevant areas, which has got some excellent information. The VAT explanatory notes there, you'll see that the link, the second of those three links, there. That will take you through to a 99-page document with all the legislative references. So if you want some bedtime reading or more detail, by all means, you can go through to there. And the last point before we get to the Q&A is my colleagues in the EU have really, maybe I'm a little bit biased, but they have put together an unbelievably professional website that has got all this information. All the information's there, but it's been distilled in such a way that is easy to locate and easy to digest. So depending on what role you play in the process, whether you're a receiver, whether you're a shipper, whatever role you are, you can easily get access to some one-pagers, some really good fact sheets there. There's also an appendix which will be provided to DHL customers, which provides the exact fields that this information we've been talking about needs to feed into, and so on. So a lot of information there. We've packaged it in such a way that we think is, as I say, easy to digest for you to make sense of, to make sure you're on track, or if not, where you need to come up to speed prior to 1 July. So without further ado, I'll throw back to Michael for some Q&A.
Well, thank you, Agnes, Gordon, Ben, for that information and those explanations. And what we'll do now is we'll move straight into the pre-submitted questions and try to get through as many of them as possible. What I'll do is read out the question. We've triaged them down into core themes and then ask the presenters then to answer those questions in a simple format for you. So the first question, again, why are these changes happening? And Agnes, if you could answer that for us, please.
Yes, to answer very briefly, to make the VAT taxation, the taxation of the VAT more fairer, simpler, and fraud-proof. So, in a nutshell, to make the European businesses more competitive, or actually to make the level playing field for them equal with third country businesses, because they already now have to collect VAT for the sales that they do within one member state or within the EU, regardless of the value of the goods.
Thank you. So to Ben, you're next. Will the EU VAT regulatory changes also apply for items sent via postal services?
Yes, it will apply to all goods regardless of the mode of transport. So there has been an uneven level playing field between postal operators and other businesses with similar profile, but mainly because of the lack of electronic data in the postal context. But this will change now, also changed for the security and safety declarations, and for the VAT as well. They will have the same requirements. So the same customs declaration and the same VAT collection rules.
Thank you, Agnes. And again, for you, will the EU VAT regulatory changes apply to all EU shipments?
Exactly, as Gordon showed you on the map, it will apply to all EU member states. So for the import one-stop shop, it is true that there is one registration sufficient for all the sales made to consumers in the whole EU. But in general, we can say that that the rules apply in the same way for all the member states.
So therefore, all the changes going to affect all European countries, examples such as Malta and Luxembourg. But could you also talk quickly about the UK, Norway and Switzerland?
They will not apply in UK, Norway and Switzerland. However, these countries have introduced very similar rules recently, or introducing in the coming period. So they have their own set of rules, but the principles are very similar to the ones that we are going to apply in the EU.
And the last question for you, Agnes, is there more information material available issued by the European Commission directly?
Yes, indeed, we have developed a dedicated website. So if you just Google VAT for e-commerce, that will lead you directly to the TAXUD website. And as you could see on the previous slide, we made a collection of these useful links.
Thank you, Agnes. So moving on to you, Gordon. If all shipments are subject to VAT as of 1st of July, how is the payment of VAT done?
Thanks, Michael. Well, as I mentioned during my presentation, you've basically got two methods that you can use. The first one will be familiar to everyone because it's basically based on the current method, but it applies to 0 upwards. And that is without the one-stop shop system. And that, remember, that is focused on not only B2C shipments, but also B2B shipments up to any commercial value, basically. So with that scheme, we will pay the VAT to the authorities upon import, and then we charge back the pre-selected payer as it is today. So in that case, we outlay the VAT, we charge it back to the payer as indicated. And that what we do with that scheme is that we ensure that there's no charges to the customers receivers of the goods using this DTB billing service. Or you can opt for the new collection scheme, the VAT collection scheme, which is the one-stop shop. Remember those 3 caveats that I mentioned before. That's for your B2C shipments, business to consumer. It's up to €150. But if you opt for this scheme, you're locked into it for all of your shipments up to €150. And using this model, the VAT is actually collected at the point of sale. If you're established in the European Union, you would pay it to the competent authorities. But remember, if you're a seller, an online platform established outside of the European Union, you need to have this tax representative to act on your behalf within the EU. And as Agnes said, one registration counts for all the 27 member states.
Thank you, Gordon. So a question for you, Ben. Will the EU VAT de minimis removal impact B2C and B2B as well?
Yes. Yeah, the short answer to that is yes. We've talked a lot about the low value B2C, the business to consumer e-commerce space, but the changes, the abolition of that €22 VAT free threshold will apply to both B2C and B2B and B2C shipments.
Thank you, Ben. So Gordon, the next one's for you. As an example, I have an online website selling goods that are shipped from Asia to the European Union. Will it be mandatory to display VAT separately at checkout for my customers?
Good question, Michael. The short answer is it's not mandatory, but it's highly recommended to always indicate the breakdown of VAT during the checkout process. And the reason for that, it helps to ensure that the customers have full visibility of the charges.
Thank you for that. Gordon, you're very popular, so you get to go again. As an example, if I opt for not using the import one-stop shop IOSS scheme, is there any alternative to avoid that VAT and other customers related charges are charged to receivers of goods?
The answer to that one, Michael, is yes. As it is today, if the shipper pre-selects to pay all DHL charges when booking a shipment on behalf of the receiver of the goods, then VAT will be outlaid by DHL. We'll actually pay it on your behalf. But you don't get away with it, of course. We then charge back the shipper together with any other related charges. For example, any bondage storage, multi-line entry. But with this scheme, it allows the shipper to be able to sell the goods to the receiver on an all-inclusive basis, avoiding charges to the receiver also. As mentioned, this is this DDP billing service.
Thank you. And again for you, Gordon, what is an EU established intermediary for IOSS?
Okay, this intermediary is a taxable entity registered in the European Union that acts as provides fiscal agency services, basically. The entity has to fulfill a series of obligations in order to get registered, laid down under the one-stop shop system that I mentioned. They take responsibility for the declaration and payment of VAT on distance sales on behalf of the seller, the platform, for all imported goods using this scheme. And remember with that one, once you have your ID or your IOSS number, that counts for all member states within the European Union. And you must have one of those, obviously, if you're established outside the European Union.
Thank you. And the last of the pre-submitted questions, and again, Gordon, you're doing such a fantastic job. We'll go with you again. My company is not established in the European Union, as an example. Can DHL act as an intermediary so I can use IOSS?
Very simple answer to this, Michael. No, we're not going to act as an intermediary for the IOSS VAT purposes at the moment. No plans to do so in the immediate future. However, if a seller is interested in using this IOSS scheme with the caveats I've mentioned, a simple search online for IOSS intermediaries will take you not only to some of the big accounting firms, but other entities that are offering this service. So it's very easy to find these sorts of partners.
So thank you very much. And thank you very much to Agnes, Gordon and Ben again for answering those questions and being very informative. If I could go to the next slide, please. Information is extremely important. We know that this is a very complex issue with lots of detail and data. So if you look at that slide, if you are a DHL Express customer, please contact your DHL representative to get a copy of this webinar presentation. If you are not a DHL customer, not a problem. It's not an issue. We're trying to be very informative. There is a contact email for you to get more information. Thank you for your time today. Thank you to the presenters and the opportunity to educate and inform everyone. And I will now pass over, being on time, very important in logistics and supply chain, to Cassia to close us off.
My name is Johnny Wise, founder and managing director of the Trans-Tasman Business Circle, and on behalf of Cassia and our whole team, thank you so much to everybody for joining. This has been a compelling presentation about a vital issue for exporters into that very important economy of the European Union. And Michael, thank you. You did a wonderful job of keeping us on time, keeping everything moving and getting through as many questions as possible. And also big thanks to Austrade for your vital role in helping particularly this region's exporters access the European Union. We had people from all over the world listening today, and everybody stayed on. This is a vital topic, and we hope that you've had some practical opportunities to learn and grow. As I'm talking, we have a webinar poll, which we'll invite you to complete as I'm doing the vote of thanks. Just share with us, please, your experiences of how you found today, and we hope that we'll be able to use these poll results to assist you even further. To our wonderful panel, thank you very much. Agnes, thank you so much for joining us for the European Union. Kirsten and Sepan, thank you for your of what we need to do and why. And of course, to Ben and Gordon, you know, the precision, particularly Ben, that you identified, the vital role of data, pure data, the importance of e-commerce, the growing role. We've got to get it right. And you've provided so many practical tools. DHL Express, a wonderful partner for exporters and importers over the world. And today was a wonderful example of your thought leadership and your compelling involvement in the global supply chain. So critical today, both before the coronavirus and even more so after that. So thank you for partnering today. Thank you to our wonderful panelists. Thank you everyone for joining. And here are the poll results so you can see how everybody else felt. We're really up there with how you rated the content and value today. And we're very pleased that you got a lot of knowledge from this. And really, these results are really positive. Please take the examples of where to go for further information that our panel have provided today. And on behalf of everybody, good evening, good afternoon, good morning, and even good night to our Kiwi listeners. Thank you again to DHL Express. Goodbye.